In a kingdom of opulence and hidden fear, one quiet soul was chosen for a purpose beyond her understanding. Esther, a young woman of faith, found herself between silence and destiny, between fear and divine calling. Her story reminds us that courage does not begin when the fear is gone. It begins when we act in faith, even while trembling. And perhaps, like Esther, you too have been placed where you are, not by chance, but by divine design, for such a time as this.
Imagine standing at the edge of a decision that could cost you everything. Your hands tremble, your heart races. You know what you must do, but the price feels unbearable. In that moment, you wonder if you have the strength to step forward into the unknown, to risk all you have built, all you have become, for something greater than yourself. This is where Esther stood, a young Jewish woman who rose from obscurity to become Queen of Persia, only to discover that her entire people faced annihilation. Her story, found in the book of Esther, chapters 2 through 8, is not just an ancient tale of bravery. It is a mirror held up to every moment you have felt powerless. Every time you have questioned whether you possess the courage to stand for what is right. Every season when you have wondered if your life has divine purpose. Today, we walk through Esther's journey from fear to faith, from silence to speaking truth, from self-preservation to self-sacrifice. And as we do, may you discover that the same courage that moved through her is available to you right now. In whatever crisis or calling you face, let us begin in the palace of King Ahasuerus, more commonly known as Xerxes, ruler of 127 provinces, stretching from India to Ethiopia. The king seeks a new queen, and young women from across the empire are brought to the palace. Among them was Hadassah, a young Jewish orphan raised by her cousin Mordecai. In the palace, she was given a new name, Esther. She is beautiful, yes, but more than that, she possesses a grace and wisdom that captivates all who meet her. Esther 2 verse 17 tells us, "The king loved Esther more than all the women, and she won grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen." Can you imagine the transformation? From orphan to queen, from obscurity to influence. And yet, Esther carries a secret. At Mordecai's instruction, she has not revealed her Jewish identity. She lives in two worlds, wearing a crown in public while hiding her true self in private. How many of us know this tension? The feeling of being seen but not truly known. The weight of success that comes with conditions. The fear that if people knew the whole truth of who we are, we might lose everything we have gained. Esther's comfortable existence is shattered when a man named Haman rises to power. Haman, the king's highest official, demands that all bow down to him. But Mordecai, faithful to God, refuses to bow to any man. Esther 3 verse 5 says, "When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage to him, Haman was filled with fury." But Haman's rage extends beyond one man. When he learns that Mordecai is Jewish, he plots to destroy not just Mordecai, but every Jewish person throughout the entire kingdom. He manipulates the king, casting lots to choose a day of destruction, and secures a royal decree that on the 13th day of the 12th month, all Jewish people are to be vanquished and their possessions plundered. The horror spreads across the empire. Mordecai tears his clothes, puts on sackcloth and ashes, and goes into the city, crying out with a loud and bitter cry. In every province where the decree arrives, there is great mourning among the Jewish people. with fasting and weeping and lamenting. And Esther, in her palace, remains unaware until her servants tell her of Mordecai's grief. She sends him clothes, but he refuses them. So she sends her trusted servant Hathach to learn what troubles him. Mordecai tells Hathach everything. He gives him a copy of the decree and instructs him to show it to Esther. And then comes the request that will change everything. Mordecai asks Esther to go to the king and beg for mercy for her people. Here is where the crisis deepens. Esther sends word back to Mordecai, explaining the law. Anyone who approaches the king without being summoned faces death, unless the king extends his golden scepter, and the king has not called for Esther in 30 days. Do you hear the fear in her response? She is not refusing, but she is wrestling. She has influence, yes, but it comes with limits. She has access, but not unlimited access. She could speak, but it might cost her life. How often do we find ourselves in this place? Aware of injustice, but paralyzed by the potential cost of speaking out. Sensing a divine calling, but terrified of what obedience might require. Knowing we could make a difference, but calculating the risk to our reputation, our comfort, our safety. Mordecai's reply cuts through her hesitation with words that echo across centuries. Esther 4, verses 13 and 14 record his message. Do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? For such a time as this. Those 6 words carry the weight of divine purpose. They suggest that Esther's entire journey, her beauty, her selection as queen, her hidden identity, her proximity to power, all of it has been preparation for this moment. She has not arrived at influence by accident. She has been positioned by providence, and the same is true for you. The struggles you have survived, the gifts you have been given, the doors that have opened, the relationships you have built, none of it is random. You have been prepared for such a time as this. The question is not whether you have what it takes. The question is whether you will trust the one who placed you where you are. Esther makes her decision. She sends this message to Mordecai in Esther 4 verse 16. Go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. If I perish, I perish. In those 5 words, fear transforms into faith. Self-protection gives way to self-sacrifice. Esther steps into her purpose, knowing she cannot control the outcome, but trusting that some things are worth the risk. She asks her community to fast with her. She does not face this alone. She surrounds herself with prayer and spiritual support. And after 3 days, she clothes herself in royal robes and stands in the inner court of the palace, visible to the king. The king sees her, and in an act of divine favor, he extends the golden scepter. Esther approaches and touches its tip. The king asks what she desires, promising to give her up to half his kingdom. But Esther moves with wisdom. She does not blurt out her request. She invites the king and Haman to a banquet. At the banquet, the king again asks her desire, and again she invites them to another banquet the next day, promising to reveal her request. Then, that night, the king cannot sleep. He orders the chronicles of his reign to be read to him. and he discovers that Mordecai once saved his life by exposing a plot against him. Yet Mordecai has never been honored for this act. The next morning, when Haman arrives to ask permission to hang Mordecai, the king instead commands Haman to honor Mordecai publicly, leading him through the city on the king's horse, proclaiming his honor. The irony is divine. The reversal is beginning. At the second banquet, King Xerxes again asks Esther for her request. And now, with courage drawn from fasting and prayer and the favor she has already received, Esther speaks the truth. Esther 7 verses 3 and 4 record her words. "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be granted me for my wish, and my people for my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed and to be annihilated." The king is enraged. Who has dared to do this? And Esther answers, "A foe and enemy. This wicked Haman." Haman's plot unravels in moments. He is executed on the very gallows he built for Mordecai. But the decree he issued still stands. For Persian law cannot be revoked. So the king gives Esther and Mordecai authority to write a new decree, permitting the Jews to defend themselves on the day appointed for their destruction. Esther 8 verse 16 tells us, "The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. Where there was mourning, now there is celebration. Where there was a death sentence, now there is deliverance. Where there was silence and hiding, now there is proclamation and protection." If you have walked with us through Esther's story, take a moment and share this message of courage with someone who needs to hear it today. Because this is not just Esther's story, it is yours. Right now, you may feel small, overlooked, or uncertain of your purpose. You may be facing a decision that terrifies you. You may sense a calling but cannot see how you could possibly fulfill it. You may be tempted to stay silent when you know you should speak. But consider this: you are alive right now, in this moment, in this season, not by accident. The challenges of this age, the injustices that grieve your heart, the needs you see around you, they are not too big for God, and you are not too small for God to use. You have been prepared for such a time as this. Like Esther, you may need to move through fear to reach faith. You may need to gather your community and ask them to pray with you. You may need to take a step even when you cannot see the outcome. But know this: when you step forward in obedience to what God has placed on your heart, you step into a current of divine favor. You align yourself with purposes larger than your own survival. The courage Esther found is available to you. Not because you are powerful on your own, but because the same God who positioned her in the palace is positioning you right now. Not because you are without fear, but because love and purpose can carry you through fear. Where is God calling you to speak when you have been silent? What injustice has He positioned you to address? What person has He placed in your path for you to serve? What dream has He planted in your heart that requires you to risk comfort for calling? You may not wear a crown, but you have influence. You may not rule a kingdom, but you have a sphere of impact. And somewhere in your world, someone is waiting for you to be brave. Someone's deliverance may depend on your willingness to say, "If I perish, I perish." Do not underestimate what God can do through one person who steps forward in faith. Esther saved a nation. What might He do through you? Heavenly Father, thank you for the story of Esther, for the reminder that you place us where we are for such a time as this. When fear rises within us, give us courage. When silence tempts us, give us words of truth, spoken in love. When doubt whispers, remind us that your purpose cannot fail. May our lives reflect your light, and may our steps align with your will, so that through us others may find hope, justice, and peace. In Jesus' name, may it be according to your will. If this story has stirred something in your spirit, if you sense God calling you to courage in your own life, take a moment to like this video and leave a comment sharing where you need to trust God for bravery. Subscribe to EnlitenU for more stories of faith, transformation, and divine purpose. Let us walk this journey together, discovering that we are all positioned for such a time as this. And as always, peace, love, light, and unity.
Thank you for spending these moments with me today. I hope this story stirred something meaningful in your spirit. A reminder that even in times of worry, fear, or doubt, you are never alone. If this video brought you comfort or inspiration, I invite you to subscribe and stay connected. And if someone you love could use a little hope or joy today, feel free to share it with them. Until next time, may your path be guided by peace, love, light, and unity.